You think explaining yourself makes you stronger. It doesn't. It tells people exactly how much you're willing to tolerate, and the wrong people are always paying attention, not to your words, to your limits. They notice how many times you repeat yourself, how carefully you choose your tone, how hard you try to be understood. And quietly, without saying a word, they adjust. They push a little further next time. Maybe you've felt this. You leave a conversation replaying everything in your head. I should have said it better. I should have been calmer. I should have explained it differently. So next time you try again, clearer, softer, more reasonable. And somehow nothing changes. Same person, same behavior, same feeling in your chest. That quiet frustration you can't quite explain. Here's the part most people don't want to admit. The problem was never your explanation. It was your expectation. You expected respect to come from being understood. You thought if you just said it the right way, they'd finally get it. But respect doesn't come from clarity. It comes from boundaries that don't move. In the modern world, this shows up everywhere. At work, someone talks over you in meetings. You smile it off, then explain your point more carefully. Online, someone takes a subtle jab at you. You write a long reply, trying to be fair, balanced, rational. In relationships, someone crosses a line. You sit them down, communicate openly, explain how you feel. And again, nothing changes, because you're still negotiating something that should never be up for negotiation. Your dignity. Stoicism takes a different approach. It doesn't teach you how to explain yourself better. It teaches you something far more uncomfortable and far more powerful. You are responsible for your response, not for convincing anyone. You don't control whether they respect you, only whether you require it. And the moment you stop trying to be understood is the moment you become harder to dismiss. This video is not about becoming cold. It's not about shutting people out. It's about something quieter, a shift in posture, from reacting to observing, from needing approval to setting terms, from explaining your worth to living as if it's already decided. Because the truth is simple. The more you explain, the more they test. But when you stop explaining, the test starts to break. Let's get into it. You don't lose power when someone disrespects you. You lose it the moment you start explaining why they shouldn't. It sounds backward, but watch closely. Every time you say, "That's not what I meant. Let me clarify. You misunderstood me." You think you're fixing the situation. They're learning something else. They're learning that your boundaries can be negotiated, that if they push a little, you'll come back and explain yourself again. Simple truth. The more you explain, the more they test. And if that makes you uncomfortable, good, because it means you're starting to see what most people miss. Most people believe respect comes from being understood. Be clear, be calm, be reasonable. Then people will respect you. That's the idea. But real life doesn't work that way. Respect doesn't come from how well you explain. It comes from what you allow to continue. A quick story, a guy works in a corporate team. Every meeting, one colleague keeps interrupting him, not aggressively, just enough to throw him off. First time he lets it slide. Second time he smiles and continues. Third time he politely says, "Let me finish." Sounds mature, but it keeps happening, week after week. Why? Because nothing actually changed. He thought he was being composed, but the other person saw something else. There's no real consequence. That's the misunderstanding. You think respect is something people realize. In reality, it's something they adjust to. Respect is not granted, it's calibrated. And once you see that, you stop trying to earn it through explanation. Most people see disrespect as emotional. They assume it comes from stress, mood, or misunderstanding. Sometimes it does, but often it's a test. Not obvious, not dramatic, subtle. A joke that goes slightly too far, a comment that downplays you, a small interruption, nothing big enough to call out directly, but enough to observe your reaction. They don't say it out loud, but the question is always there. How far can I go with this person? A real-life example. You post something thoughtful on social media. Someone replies with a slightly sarcastic comment, not an attack, just enough to poke. You respond calmly, explain your perspective. They reply again. A bit sharper this time, you explain again. At that point, it's no longer a discussion, it's a pattern. They're not trying to understand you. They're trying to read you. Disrespect rarely starts loud. It starts subtle. And if you don't recognize it as a test, you keep playing the game without knowing the rules. But here's the deeper layer. Your reaction is teaching them how to treat you. Every reaction you give sends a signal. No announcement needed, no explanation required, just your behavior. If you react with anger, you're easy to trigger. If you stay silent out of fear, you avoid conflict. If you over-explain, you seek approval. People don't need to analyze it. They feel it. A short moment. You're in a group conversation. Someone makes a joke about you. Everyone laughs. You laugh too. But something doesn't sit right. So you add, "Yeah, but I'm not really like that." You explain yourself. No one argues, but next time, the same joke comes back. Not because they hate you, because they learned. That spot works. People don't just hear your words, they study your reactions. Here's the deeper realization. The pain you feel isn't just from what they said, it's from the meaning you attach to it. You tell yourself, "They don't respect me. I need to fix this. I need to explain better." That internal story drives your reaction, and your reaction becomes their data. A loop. Need is leverage. The moment someone senses that you need them to understand you, the balance shifts. And now the real question appears. If explaining doesn't create respect, what does? That's where everything starts to change. Most people walk into interactions like they're being graded. They react, they defend, they adjust their tone, hoping to get it right, like a student trying to pass. But the shift happens when you stop trying to pass and start observing instead. You're no longer asking, "Did I say that correctly? Did they misunderstand me?" You're asking something else. What are they trying to get from this? Attention, control, a reaction? That question changes everything. Because now, you're not inside the situation. You're slightly above it. You're watching the pattern, not just feeling the moment. Power begins the moment you stop performing and start observing. And once you see the pattern, you don't rush to react anymore. You pause. The pause looks small, but it changes the entire dynamic. When someone says something sharp, your instinct is immediate. Defend, explain, correct. But that instant reaction is exactly what they expect. And expectation is where they gain control. A pause interrupts that. Even 2 seconds, you don't answer right away. You don't rush to fix the moment, you let it sit. A quick story. A client once received a harsh email from a manager late at night. Accusatory tone, unfair claims. His first instinct? Type a long reply. Clear everything up. Instead, he closed the laptop. Next morning, he responded with 3 sentences: short, factual, calm, no emotion. The tone of the conversation shifted immediately. Why? Because he didn't feed the tension. The pause is where you take control back from your impulses. It's not silence out of weakness. It's silence with intention. Silence is not submission. It's selection. And when you create that space, you start seeing something deeper. Why certain words affect you more than others. Not every insult lands the same. Some bounce off instantly. Others stay in your mind for hours, sometimes days. Why? It's not about the words. It's about what they touch. A short moment. Someone once told you, "You're not that reliable." On the surface, it's just a comment, but it stays with you. You replay it. You feel the need to prove them wrong. Not because it's true, but because a part of you isn't fully certain it's false. That's the uncomfortable truth. An insult only sticks where there is doubt. If there's no internal question, there's nothing to hook onto. This is where most people look outward. They try to correct the other person. But the real work is inward. Not to agree, but to understand. Where is this reaction coming from? Because once you see that clearly, you stop reacting from that place. And when you stop reacting, the dynamic changes again. That's where the next tool comes in. Detachment is often misunderstood. People think it means becoming cold, uncaring, emotionless. That's not it. Detachment is clarity. It's the ability to step half a step back and observe what's happening without being pulled into it, like watching a scene instead of being trapped inside it. Think of it this way: a doctor in an emergency room doesn't panic with every patient, not because they don't care, because they need clarity to act. That's the mindset. When someone disrespects you, you don't absorb it immediately. You observe it. Tone, timing, pattern. A real example. In a team project, one person keeps dismissing your ideas. Before, you would push back emotionally. Try to prove your value. Now you watch. You notice it only happens when others are present. You notice the pattern of dominance. You stop taking it personally. And once you see it clearly, you respond differently. Short, direct, unaffected, no performance. When you stop taking things personally, you start seeing them accurately. And accuracy gives you options. You can engage, you can ignore, you can step away. But now, it's a choice, not a reaction. And this is where things get interesting. Because when you stop reacting the way they expect, they don't stop immediately. They push harder. Which leads us to the next phase most people misunderstand. The moment you change your response, don't expect peace, expect pressure. Because for a long time, the dynamic worked in their favor. They said something, you reacted. They pushed, you explained. They provoked, you engaged. That loop gave them something: attention, control, energy. Now you remove your usual reaction, and the system breaks. But it doesn't disappear quietly. It spikes. They talk louder, they get sharper, they bring up old things. Not because it's getting worse, because it's no longer working. A short story. Someone decides to stop engaging in constant arguments with a family member. No more long debates, no more emotional replies. At first, things seem calm. Then suddenly, the other person escalates. More criticism, more pressure, more attempts to pull them back in. For a moment, it feels like a mistake, but it isn't. When a pattern stops working, it intensifies before it fades. Most people fail here. They think, I made it worse. So they go back to old behavior, and the pattern resets. If you break under pressure, you teach them to press harder next time. Hold steady, and something shifts. When emotions rise, people switch from facts to labels. You're selfish. You're lazy. You never care. These aren't observations. They're hooks. If you argue with them, you step into their frame. Now you're defending your identity instead of addressing reality. The Stoic approach is different. You don't fight labels. You return to facts. Simple, direct, unemotional, a real-life example. At work, someone says, "You always miss deadlines." The instinct is to defend yourself. List everything you've done. Explain context. Instead, you say, "The last 2 projects were delivered on time. The report was submitted yesterday." And you stop there. No tone, no extra explanation, just reality. Facts don't argue, they stand. When you respond this way, something changes. There's no emotional fuel, no back and forth. The conversation either stabilizes or dies. The shorter your response, the stronger your position. And when you consistently show up like this, you start noticing something deeper. The real source of your reactions wasn't outside. It was inside. There's a reason certain words hit harder. Not because they're more accurate, because they're closer to something unresolved. A short moment. Someone says, "You're not disciplined." You feel it immediately, not just irritation, but tension, because part of you isn't fully sure it's wrong. That's where the work is, not in proving them wrong, but in seeing yourself clearly. You can't be shaken by what you've already accepted. When you acknowledge your own imperfections, they lose their power as weapons. If it's true, you improve quietly. If it's not, you let it pass. No performance needed. This is where real stability comes from. Not perfection, but ownership. What you accept within yourself cannot be used against you. And once that foundation is solid, there's one final shift that changes everything. This is the hardest part. Not external, internal. You let go of the hope that they will change, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Because hope in the wrong place keeps you stuck. You keep explaining, hoping they'll understand. You keep engaging, hoping they'll be fair. You keep waiting, hoping they'll become different. But patterns don't change because you wish them to. They change when you stop participating in them. A short story. Someone spends years trying to fix a relationship. More communication, more patience, more effort. Every time things go wrong, they think next time will be different. Until one day, they stop expecting anything to change. No announcement, no confrontation, just a quiet shift. They adjust their behavior, limit access, stop over-investing, and suddenly, everything feels lighter. You suffer more from imagined change than from reality itself. Letting go of hope here is not giving up on people. It's giving up on illusions. You stop relating to who they could be and start responding to who they consistently are. Clarity begins where expectation ends. And from that place, your power returns. Not loud, not aggressive, just steady. Now the question is no longer, how do I make them respect me? It becomes, what kind of behavior do I allow in my life? And that changes everything. At some point, words stop mattering. Not because communication is useless, but because you've already said enough. This is where most people hesitate. They explain their boundaries, they repeat them, they try to make them understood. But real boundaries aren't explained again and again. They're enforced through access. Who gets your time? Who gets your attention? Who gets to see the real you? That's where the shift becomes visible. A simple example. You have a friend who constantly makes subtle jabs. Nothing direct, always disguised as humor. Before you laughed it off, then you explained how it made you feel. Nothing changed. Now you stop sharing personal things with them. Conversations become shorter, more neutral. You're still polite, but no longer open. Boundaries are not what you say, they're what you stop giving. This isn't punishment. You're not trying to hurt them. You're adjusting to reality. Respect is missing. Access changes. Not everyone deserves full access to you. And when you start living like that, people begin to notice. The moment you stop reacting the way you used to, the entire dynamic shifts. Not always dramatically, sometimes quietly. Some people will pull back. They realize the usual tactics don't work anymore. No reaction, no drama, no reward. So they move on. Others will adjust, not necessarily becoming kinder, but more careful. Because now there's a limit. A short story. Someone used to be the easygoing one in every group, always understanding, always flexible, but also often overlooked. After a while, they changed. Less explaining, less overgiving, more silence when something felt off. At first, people were confused. Then, something shifted. Interruptions stopped. Jokes softened. Conversations became more balanced, not because they demanded respect, because they stopped tolerating the lack of it. When you stop accepting less, people either rise or leave. And both outcomes are useful, because either way, you're no longer stuck in the same pattern. At the center of all this is one quiet decision. You stop explaining your worth, not because you can't, but because you no longer need to. You realize something simple. The people who respect you don't need explanations, and the people who don't won't be convinced by them. So you stop trying. You don't need to be understood to be respected. That shift is not loud, no confrontation, no big moment, just a different way of being. You speak less, but mean more. You react less, but see more. You give less, but value it more. And slowly, the noise fades. Not because the world changed, because you did. The day you stop explaining your worth is the day your life gets quieter. If something in this video felt familiar, it's probably not new. You've seen these patterns before, at work, in relationships, even in yourself. The difference now is clarity. You don't have to fight every battle. You don't have to correct every misunderstanding. You don't have to prove who you are. You just have to stand where you've decided to stand. Calm, clear, unmoved. And that takes practice, not perfection, consistency. So if this way of thinking resonates with you, stay with it. Not for this channel, for the version of you that stops reacting and starts choosing. There's another video on the screen that goes deeper into building that kind of inner control. Watch that next. And until then, protect your mind, protect your energy, and stop negotiating your dignity.